What if you grew up in a belief system that told you everything around you was an illusion? What if you were told everything that happened to you, from being sick to stubbing a toe to being bullied at school, was your fault for not knowing the truth? What if you were denied even the most basic health care, from pain pills to checkups to vaccinations? How do you unravel yourself from this belief system? And what happens when you do? My name is Hillary Alexander, and this is Leaving Christian Science. Welcome to episode 3 of Leaving Christian Science. Today I'm interviewing Elizabeth, who is one of the admins of the ex Christian Scientist Facebook groups. So we've kind of been around each other, I would say, for probably at least 10 years or so. Yeah, and sort of aware of each other. We're also Facebook friends outside of the groups. We kind of know each other's lives a little bit.
Yep.
So I guess we'll start at the beginning. Tell me when Christian Science came into your family's lives.
Um, so on my dad's side, he was born into it. My grandfather encountered it from a CS chaplain in the war. I'm not sure which one. Probably World War II. And then on brief leave, he ended up in the town my grandmother was from, where she was busy being 15 years old, and asked her to marry him. And she and her best friend married him and his best friend before he went off to war. And then he came back, I suppose, at that point and announced that they were going to be Christian Scientists. And this is largely viewed by their children, my dad and my uncle, as a good thing. And perhaps it was, because they both came from a rough family background. And it seemed to basically bring them up in their behaviors, in their expectations, and of course they were very much part of the prosperity aspect of Christian Science and trying to show all of that. My mom was also born into it. It went back one generation further on my maternal grandmother's side. Her parents got into it. My mother's mother was born into it. My mother was born into it. My mother's dad also encountered it from a chaplain.
Interesting.
And I believe that might be wrong, because I think his mother was a Christian Scientist. He was like the second, he was positioned as you are in the family. So there was like a gap in time, and then he became a new child of the new family, blended family, and his mother, I think, was a Christian Scientist. So he had older siblings who weren't. My grandmother's mother is the big dramatic story. So she had some kind of a stomach ailment, which is so classic CS testimonial, like all the stuff in the books. I had dyspepsia. So she was in the hospital with a stomach ailment, and so the story goes.
There's always a big story. Yeah.
So the story goes, she was about to have her stomach removed, which I imagine was a very bad idea in 1920 or whatever it was. And her husband had, I don't know if he'd heard of CS, you saw a journal in the lobby of the hospital, something like that, contacted the first person he was led to put his finger on. She happened to be down in Texas, and she said, I'll be there tomorrow. I'll leave on the first flight and I'll be there. And he's like, no, you got to come now. Like she's dying. They're going to take her. And she's like, I'll be there tomorrow. And this was like a very, wow, they're so centered and powerful.
Confident.
or that was not enough urgency.
Yeah.
And I think she said something like, by the time I get there, she'll be out of bed or something. And so he relayed this message to her, which I sometimes think about what the tone of that message might have been. Like, this is a woman trapped in the hospital who's being told she's dying and their stomach's about to be taken out. And then her husband, who didn't look like the friendliest guy in the world from the pictures, her husband, informs her that she's not going to have this surgery. And this practitioner is flying in to tell her some stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know. Maybe it was like really sweet, but it just feels kind of terrifying. So by the time the practitioner arrived the next day, she was out of bed and eating.
Because of course the practitioner had been doing prayerful work for her all this time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder how maybe scared she was. And she was like, I guess I better eat something.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
like,
thing that's so frustrating is we'll never really know the stories behind these so-called miraculous healings.
yeah. I think one of the wisest things I heard, it might have actually been your sister Madeline, one of the wisest things I heard somebody say in group, that you you enter into Christian Science with some sort of a complaint, which is possibly anxiety related, and the practitioner that you make contact with becomes a therapist of a sort, and you go on thinking that it works until you have an actual health crisis, at which point you go under because you think it's going to work again.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the simple truth behind a lot of this. Like, you thought it healed you, but it just made you stop freaking out, or maybe the medicine wasn't as evolved yet at that point, and so you got a better result by stopping it, and
Yeah.
then it worked for 40 years until you actually had a heart problem, and then oops.
All of a sudden it's not working. Yeah, and I've heard from other groups. I'm pretty obsessed with Nexium, and one of the things that one of their ex members said was that yes, when he was in the group, the anxiety related issues he had did seem to be fixed,
Yeah,
but it all came back.
yeah,
It was all fixed sort of temporarily on this adrenaline high of joining this group and all the love bombing and all the good
yeah,
feelings, but it didn't fix it. It
right,
just fixed it temporarily, or it just sort of went away on its own based on your own chemicals.
right.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on because so many things are anxiety related, as we now know.
Yeah, yeah. Which like,
So
and
then
then
you were raised in it. Tell me
yeah.
about your Christian Science childhood.
um, one of the things that hopped out at me when I was kind of thinking about this ahead of time is the uh, Lucia Green. I'm going to forget the last syllable of her name. Lucia Greenfield, Father, Mother, God, which is autobiographical and gives a lot of information about her childhood. And when I read that, it wasn't the first thing I read. I had already kind of knocked down the wall and was then just looking for more, um, as the Christian Scientists call it, obnoxious literature. Obnoxious. Um,
That's my new
and
band name, by the way.
that shit is a great band name.
Obnoxious books.
She describes aspects of her childhood, like physical landscape, like the plaque on the wall and the picture of Mary Baker Eddy or whatever. And she also was describing her notions of what these things meant that people were telling her, and her notions about how she should handle certain things or what was appropriate. This young mind. And my reaction, as best as I can put it, was this strangest combination of, oh my god, that was what happened to me. That was exactly what happened to me. And at the same time, excuse me, that was mine. You don't get to have had that. What? Wait a minute. What the hell's going on? Um,
That was
Very
unique
strange.
to me.
Yeah, and that was one of my like red flags. Like, okay, that's culty.
Yeah.
Like,
Because I'm special. You're not special. I'm the
yeah.
special one.
And at the same time, like, oh my God, I've spotted one in the wild. Like
Yeah.
I still react if I see the words Christian and science in close proximity in an article or something. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, I do
but
too. Even if I see like a capitalized C and S near each
yeah,
other,
yep,
I kind of like, oh,
that's a red flag,
yeah.
right? It's like, yeah,
Yeah, I really relate to that feeling of the duality of you're kind of happy that you find other people having the same experiences and you're also a little bit oddly jealous because it means you're not special.
yeah. Like, I remember, like, it was definitely there from inception. Like, I was aware of Christian Science as soon as I was aware of pretty much anything else. I mean, I know obviously there's mother baby stuff, right? But like, it's there right away. And I was all in. So that's maybe the simplest way to kind of snapshot my childhood is that everybody was radically reliant. There was nobody in my periphery who would who was going to go to the hospital or take an aspirin, or we didn't keep first aid stuff in the house because it was inviting an injury.
Yeah.
And I was all in. I was the kid, like I was, listening to some of the others talk, saying like I was the kid that they didn't want to have in their class. And I admire that so much, right? As a child, I was the kid you did want in your class because I was like, hey, are we going to do some more Socratic questioning? Because I'm here for that. I'm going to get the right answer. And the other kids, I was like, what is wrong with them? They don't get it. Like, even as a little, like 4 or 5-year-old, I was like, what is wrong with them? Answer the questions. This is amazing. This is.
Yeah, I remember being really annoyed by when on the rare occasion there were other children in the Sunday schools that I went to.
Right.
I remember being really irritated because they were so like not into it and so disrespectful and like not paying attention. I was like, come on.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. This is the thing we're doing.
yeah.
Come on. Yeah. And I also, some of the things I was kind of thinking about, I think I was quite healthy as a child. I don't think that's a unreliable narrator moment. Like, I'm pretty sure I really wasn't sick very much. And that sort of supported the story, because it was like, well, I am more healthy than most. And then on
So
top of that, you
therefore,
are getting sent to school, even if you are sick. So then you appear even more healthy than most. Um, and I was excelling at a very early age. I was excelling in academic things, so that of course is credited to it as well.
and I think a lot of people that come up as Christian Science children have this sort of perfectionist
Yeah,
thing, because of course from the moment we're born we're told we're perfect.
yeah, yeah.
And one of the
And I
things you mentioned ahead of time was which I share this also, is I have to say I'm glad in some ways that I had this "you're God's perfect child" thing growing up and not "you're a sinner,"
yeah,
because like you, I can't say that having low self-esteem has ever been an issue for me.
right,
It just
yeah,
that's not a thing for me, where
right.
I really see it in friends and I'm like, wow, that's like really an issue in their lives. And I'm pretty convinced that it comes from being told we're perfect all the time.
Yeah, yeah. It's like there may be other pitfalls to that,
Yeah, it's not
Um,
perfect, but
but
it helps in some
I
ways.
guess I wouldn't trade.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Yeah.
And that doesn't feel particularly culty to me. Some of the stuff around it, I can see like leftover stuff, but it's like, no, I'm pretty sure like I've never had the experience of wanting to trade places with someone. Um, and that to me reads as a pretty solid self-esteem. Of course it's Swiss cheesy, of course there's holes in it, but that does feel like a genuine good takeaway. um, the where you run into problems is that we're not.
Right.
So as things become more and more complicated as you become older, and you see more and more how gray things are, and what ethics really, how tangly ethics really get, and all those things that are just not there in childhood, um, you need to maybe get some help or some support. And that's I'm not going to do that. I need to get my, I was talking about in the mental health section, when I first reached out for assistance with mental health stuff. um, the first thing you encounter is that anxiety and depression scale, real straightforward questions. And I didn't see myself doing it right away. I had to go through a couple, they give them to you all the time, right? So I had to go through a couple of those assessments before I started to be like, oh. But what I would do is the question, read the question. The question is, are how difficult are these things making it to conduct your daily life? How difficult is the anxiety making it, for example? And I would watch my mind go, uh-huh, and 8, 7, 6, 5, like down the scale. Like if they asked you to rate it 1 to 10, I'll just watch myself rationalize, same voices, well, what could I have done differently? And is it really because of this? And until it's down to 1, at which point I can answer, no, I'm fine, or some version of that. So that makes it very difficult to get into to break into therapy and actually get the assistance that you need, because it's very easy to sit there and talk and not actually let any of the stuff in, and censor yourself until you can get that answer down to a nice one or a zero.
Yeah. Did you finally have a therapist at some point who figured this out, or did you kind of figure it out yourself?
I think I figured it out well, you know what's tricky? A good therapist, you don't realize that they're helping you along, right? So I guess I'm uncomfortable to say I figured it out myself, but it seemed like that's what was happening. It seemed like I was sort of noticing my own behavior in therapy. And what I started to say is, what treatment modality do you think I would respond to the most other than talk therapy? And once I said that, they were like, okay, you get it then? Okay. All right, great. Yeah, let's get you to stop talking. Let's do EMDR, or let's do somatic work, or let's do, right. Um, and that's those therapists have been the ones that got it the most, when they were like, yeah, I see, you need to stop just being able to talk at me for an hour.
Yeah. So you grew up physically healthy, which is good. I
Yeah.
did too. I didn't have any major medical issues, thank goodness.
Yep.
How was the emotional part of your childhood with your parents? Were
Yeah.
they classic CS like feelings deniers?
Yeah, and it's tricky because I there's so many things that are like questionable. Um, like, stuff like being bullied and teased at school, including for being a Christian Scientist, of course. And then coming to sort of just like swallowing that for all the times that it would happen. And then at one point, I felt that a teacher had not backed me up appropriately, or had misinterpreted. And I brought this to my dad. And I remember this conversation as a good conversation. It was only when I started to kind of see things at a little bit of a deeper thing, when I was a little older, that I was like, okay, that he said that because of this aspect of Christian Science, and this was not supportive. But what he said was, well, there was, in essence, what he said was, well, there's probably something else you did that you didn't get caught for. So it's just fair that you were wrong, you were wrongfully blamed for this thing you didn't do.
Ugh.
And in retrospect, I see that what he was actually saying was, I don't want to get involved in this.
Yeah.
Um, and that, I think, is the problem with a lot of CS parenting decisions, is that the thing is, like, taking the kid to the doctor is a part-time job. You're constantly assessing symptoms, trying to decide if it's time, if you're a bad parent if you don't take them, if you're overreacting if you do take them. Then when you take them, they're there for 6 hours, stuck there with them, and they don't want to be there either. And then you have to go get the prescription, and something wrong with it, and and then you got to follow up with their primary care physician 5 days later, and then blah, 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 blah. It's
It's a lot.
You can bypass, and that's not even taking into account health insurance, which back then would have
Yeah.
been a crucial, way more crucial factor even than it is now. Like, if you're a Christian Scientist, you can bypass all of that. All of that. You don't have to do anything physically, do anything.
Yeah,
And
there's
still
no
you can,
there's no midnight emergency room
yeah,
visits. There's
yeah,
no
no, no.
giant bills coming in the mail a month
You
later, which is what
you
happened
don't
to
have to
me.
do any of the things. You just have to think really hard.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think it's a it's a trap that's hard to get out of, because you first would have to ask yourself, is this part of my interest in Christian Science? And if so, what should I be doing to fix this instead? Is it hard for me to take responsibility for things? Is it hard for me to cope with the fast pace of life? Is it hard for me to do self care? So now I can't do care for my kid either. Um, and the prospect of doing all those things, when you could just tell the child that it's their responsibility to figure out what happened in the past that caused this cold, you can just sit there. Yeah,
Yeah.
here you go, baby. Here, read your books.
Yeah. And unless
I
you
was
call a
free.
practitioner, it's free.
Right, right, right. Yeah, it's free, exactly. So yeah, yeah, there was something
Yeah.
there.
I had an incident with when I had my first son when he was maybe 9, 10 months old. He had this little red dot right under his eye, and it was just like that for a few months. And then all of a sudden it started growing and like pushing out from the skin like a mole.
Mhm.
And I finally did take him to a doctor because it was concerning how quickly it was growing. And I've had some issues with skin cancer and stuff. So I was like, all right, let's go. And the doctor said, "Oh, it's just a strawberry hemangioma, it'll resolve on its own." I was like, "Great."
Yep.
That night, I take him home and I'm changing him and I flip him over and the thing bursts and it just starts spurting blood
Yeah.
like a fountain. And I I try to put a Band-Aid, but I can't really because he's tiny and it's right under his eye,
Yeah.
so that doesn't work. So I'm sort of like thinking, well, I'll just put pressure to stop the bleeding and it'll just stop, it'll heal up and then I'll take him back to the doctor or whatever, it'll be fine. Well, it didn't stop. It just kept coming and coming and coming. And this went on for a while, like more than I care to admit,
Right.
that I just kind of let it go like that, thinking it's got to heal up, it's got to stop. He's not a hemophiliac, I don't think. I think I would know that by now. So
Right, right.
it's just gonna stop. And then I had this moment where I look down and he's on the bed and he's okay, like he's not upset or hurt. He's just kind of fussy.
Yeah.
And there's just blood everywhere. Like I've got all these cloths like with blood
Right.
and it's
Yes,
all
yes,
over
yes.
him. And I look
Yep.
at this horror show of
Yeah.
this little baby covered in blood. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Call 911 now.
Right,
What is the matter with
right,
you? And I was like,
right,
oh my
right.
God. Yeah.
That's how
Okay.
it yeah.
And like, I know a Christian Scientist would not, like a non ex Christian Scientist would not have done that. They would have
Right,
thought right away, this is a problem.
right, I
So,
have to
we
control
get
the way
in
I'm
the
here.
ambulance, we go to the hospital, and sure enough, it's a vascular mole. So it was going to like a main artery
Right.
and it's like he wouldn't have died. He
Yeah,
would have
but
been
still,
okay,
like,
but he did need to go somewhere to have it stitched up because it
I think
never would
about,
have
like,
stopped.
what would have hardened in you if you had not stepped through that the way that you did, right? Like, I don't even mean that, like, so personally, but, like, that's Christian Science teaches parents that the only thing that can harm their children is their own fear,
Right.
which completely cuts you off from any instinct whatsoever that you might have in regards to your child.
Yeah, having a
You're
proper
not allowed to
reaction.
access, right, you're not allowed to access what you accessed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how many times did I look at this baby with blood all down his little onesie and just kind of not feel
Right,
anything before I went, "Oh shit.
right, right.
This is serious. Like stop. Just get help." You
Yep,
know?
yep.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think, what maybe all these different emerging from cults movements can kind of find together, I wonder, is like, how is it that an ideology becomes the top priority over relationships?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, whatever that ideology is, then we can even get out of debating whether all Christianity is a cult, like all that is, it almost kind of feels like a distraction. um, because really what it is it is heartbreaking when an ideology isn't anything. It isn't anything unless people believe it. It's just a fart in the wind. Everybody just has to kind of deify their own. So you can't say that, but it's nothing. It isn't
Yeah.
anything.
It's not
Story we're
real.
telling ourselves. And of course, it could also be a set of values or whatever, but the set of values isn't you. You're the one doing it. You chose that ideology to guide you, whatever, whatever. But if it makes your child disown you, or it makes you unable to feel that your father is dying painfully and to help, um, then stop, rewind.
Yeah. It's time to rethink the ideology.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So at what point did you, because you were all in like I
Yep,
was,
yep.
at what point did it start to crack for you?
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and like I said, it was less of a straw that broke the camel's back and more of a tear down the wall gradually kind of thing. So it does come to me as a series of, the first few, you shake it off. You first few, like, wait a minute, you kind of just keep going. And one of them for me is it's very silly, but that's why I saw it. Is that I was 16 years old, I was at Prin, the Iraq War was starting. And I was of an age where I was going to make that very much about me. I'm grieving. Oh my God, it's war. I didn't even really know enough about the history, but I knew that I was supposed to be like, this is my time, this is my war. So it had my attention. And, I was always playing my little Game Boy, playing Super Mario, where you have to try over and over and over again to jump these obstacle courses, and you keep failing and you finally get through. And I'm deep in it at Principia, I mean, you're surrounded by, this is the boarding school for Christian Scientists. I would notice when I was playing this game, you get a little voice in your head tells you what to do.
She has it, the book.
You should have turned your sled, Travis. You heard a voice in your head saying maybe you shouldn't go fast on these hills, but you didn't listen. And now you done broke your butt. So it's very difficult then to differentiate what is this voice in my head in the absence of psychology and being told that God is the one in there talking. I'm like, so God is telling me when to jump in this game, I guess. Because I mean, I'm not understanding its muscle memory. I don't know what muscle memory is. I'm not understanding that every time I do the course, I'm getting more instinctual. And so I will seem to know something before I know it. But there was something about, there's a war over here and they're bombing citizens. And I've actually been thinking that God is helping me win at Mario. Okay, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
So what is going on here? That was like a little, and I mean, I'm at Prin. I'm not going to get it the rest of the way yet. But that was maybe one of the very first, like, knock, knock, knock. Like, this isn't just all for me. This isn't the Elizabeth show. Nobody gives a crap about whether you're winning at Mario if they don't give a crap about these people dying. There's just, come on. And then, of course, you can apply that to other things, and you'll start to hear the judgmentalism in any Christian Scientist who's saying, I'm so lucky that I found my keys, or I didn't have the car accident that the person next to me had. Like, some of those testimonies, like, I'm driving down the road, and all of a sudden I hear the Mary Baker Eddy's blah, blah, blah in my head, and I knew that I was supposed to swerve to the left, and instead this other guy got hit. Is basically what they're saying.
Yeah. With zero understanding of how
congratulations, I guess.
Yeah, very self-centered, profoundly self-centered. Yeah.
And then the ongoing, tap, tap, tap is that I didn't go through puberty. So when I was like 10 or 11, I now realize in retrospect, something started to start up a little bit. And then it just stopped. It was like a souffle deflating. And by the time I was like 13, my mom was kind of acknowledging, like, that was odd. I was expecting it was about to happen, and you just were having a little fluctuation in the way things went down. So then I started to get, no lie, questions from extended family at holidays each year. Have you gotten your period yet?
Oh my God.
No, uncle, whatever. I haven't. Thanks.
Yeah, I got those too.
I'm going to die now because I'm 13 and you just asked me if I got my period yet. So
yeah.
Thanks for bringing me my death. And it would happen each year, and it kept happening until I was about 15. And what would happen is it would be like, well, my neighbor's daughter didn't get it till she was 14. Well, I once heard of a circus freak who didn't get to their 50. You know what I mean? Like, I was trying to think of whatever example they could think of. And then they sent me to Prin, which was a neat way to sidestep that debate because you can't go there if you're receiving medical treatment. And 15, I would say, is about as old as you can let your kid get before you take him to the doctor and say, hey, something's wrong with their underworks, right? Um, so I didn't go to a doctor until I was 25 years old, but I spent all of my teenage years praying for my period
Wow.
and
Yeah.
thinking that I was not going through puberty because my thinking was not pure enough, which is a real mind fuck because those don't go together.
Yeah.
Um,
Because once again, it's all your
that was,
fault. You
yeah,
had to have done something.
yeah,
You had to have thought something wrong.
ongoing project of Elizabeth's that she had to. I didn't have any ovaries. I was born without ovaries. I'm praying to get my period, and there's no factory in there. Um, so the thing is, nothing could have changed that. It's a total mystery. It's just a one-off weird thing. It's nothing in my chromosomes or my genes. It just happened. And if they brought me to a doctor then, doctors in the current day have told me, yeah, there's nothing that they could have done. You know, they might have decided to do something or other with hormones, and so it's again nothing to be mad about on a level of someone who really endures some sort of a crippling after effect from medical neglect. But it did make me crazy and miserable for a good 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you didn't know what was happening. Do you feel like if you'd gotten just that closure, you could have not had all that upset?
Interestingly, when I finally went to the doctor, it correspond that was the year that it started to crumble on a more psychological level. So I don't know if it was events with my partner. That's where I kind of really encountered psychology for the first time and had to make some decisions, um, or whether it was this doctor's visit that finally came and was very unsatisfying because I thought that they were going to fix everything.
Hmm.
And that was one of the last notes I sent. You may not even have seen it, but basically, what's curious to me too is, Christian Scientist mindset, it seems, growing up is, or anyway, mine was, that I completely believed in Christian Science. Um, and then I knew there was this whole other world where you go to a doctor instead, and doctors suck. That's my, all right, got it.
Very black and white. Yeah.
Very black and white. But the thing is, I also had this notion that if you did go to a doctor, they would fix everything, which is very odd because seems quite, it seems to go against that I believed Christian Science, like where it's like almost like it was stored over there. Well, if it really gets too bad, then I'll go to the doctor and they'll fix everything, which they won't. That's not how
Yeah.
that works. Especially if you've left it go. It very much dovetails with what you and Jeremy were talking about, where somebody tells themselves that, well, the second I go to the doctor, second somebody goes to the doctor, then they start finding all this stuff. And you grind this belief in with anecdotal evidence that other people have said, yep, that too. Remember Aunt Mary, she was dead 40 days after she went in there. Yet because Aunt Mary had cancer for 17 years and nobody knew. So when she finally went, that's because the pain or the dysfunction became so all encompassing that she couldn't do anything anymore because she was nearing her death.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, again, black and white thinking, it was really interesting to read how you felt like you expected medicine to be this magical thing. Because
yeah,
we're used to thinking magically.
yeah. And we invested it with so much. I was
Yeah.
terrified of pills. I was terrified of pills
Terrified. Yeah.
and very, very curious. But like proximity to pills could cause problems. My
Yeah.
family clearly reacted with with heckler energy to roast any medical commercial that came on.
Yeah, we did too. Yeah.
You mute. It's not enough to mute it. And I just said this in group. I don't mean to like quote myself, but like we're gonna mute it And then in this silence that we claim to be really comfortable with, and you'd think they would be based on Christian Science services, instead, in that we're going to be so uncomfortable in that silence that we now have to heckle the commercial, these dumb people, these dumb doctors, and we're sitting here telling ourselves that the rest of the world is stupid for taking medicine, and then where does the pill know where to go anyway? How do you know?
Right.
It's ridiculous. It's so embarrassing. Like, these were intelligent people,
Adults. Yeah.
and I recently recalled it, and what was horrifying to me wasn't even the fact that we'd said the things. It was that I had not actually gone back to that data to examine why we were wrong. Like, it's like, and that's how many other areas have I not done that? Like, how many other areas are unexamined and I don't realize it? It kind of freaks me out.
Yeah. And one of the things too with us with the mocking of medicine was I very much remember my mother saying things like, well, I mean, you could take the pill, but you know, it's not going to solve the real problem.
Right.
It was always this thing of like, well, you can take the easy way out,
Right.
but it's not going to solve the real thing. And it's like, well, what else are we supposed to be solving? Like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you said something the other night that sounded to me a lot like one of the things I memed that you'd said, which is, you said, I never experienced a healing. I spent a lot of time in pain on bathroom floors, though. That resonated with me so strongly. Yeah.
Yeah, I never took pain pills probably until I was in my early 30s and finally had to go to the doctor for birth
Yeah.
control. So I had horrific menstrual cramps every month, horrific, to the point where I would have to take at least a day or two off of work every month. And I remember even coworkers being like, you can't keep doing
Right.
this.
Right. Right.
You're going to lose your job basically. And yeah, I would just literally like writhe in pain on the cold bathroom floor,
Yeah.
desperately trying to know the truth. And every month this would happen like
Yeah.
clockwork.
Every
I would
month.
just be in horrific pain.
Yep.
And when I finally did start to take aspirin or whatever, it was just that was something that
Miraculous.
was magical.
Yeah. Right.
Magical.
I was like, mine was a friend was coming over to pick me up. We are going to go out. We got there, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I've got a screaming headache. I cannot go out. And he was like, oh, you're going out. Where's your Advil? I don't have Advil. Right. You're a weirdo. Okay. I'm going to get some. They gave me these 2 Advils, and of course I was terrified.
Terrified. Yeah.
And 20 minutes later, I was like, it makes the headache go away. And he was like, it does. Let's go. That was mind blowing. I was still terrified of anything I would take for a long time after that. Like, I had horrible motion sickness in planes to the point that it just made me not want to go anywhere. And I think after learning about the existence of Dramamine, I think it took me several more plane trips before I was willing to try it. I was so afraid that I'd have some reaction on the plane and make it even worse.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me too, this fear of having a reaction, which, does happen to
Sure.
people. It's not a thing that doesn't happen, but the odds of that are so slim. Even when I got my first shots when I was holding my newborn, and finally got my first vaccines, and my first thought was like, well, what if I have a reaction? What if I'm allergic? Like, we don't know what's been going on all this time. I
Right.
was 39 years old, and that's what I said to the doctor. I was like, just tell me what to look for if something starts to go wrong, so at least I'll know and I can tell you, like, will I get a rash? Like, if I know that I'm allergic, blah, blah, blah. And of course, none of those things happened.
Right.
And it was fine. And like I said in my interview with my sister, I think it was, it's this teeny little needle and this tiny little pinch. Nothing happened afterwards except I was
Yeah.
protected against whooping cough.
Right.
That was the worst thing that happened, was I was protected against a disease that would kill my newborn.
Right.
Yeah. So crazy. But yeah, I think I would imagine there's a lot of people that come out of Christian Science and get into the medical world, as we tend to do as we get older, and are a little disappointed that it's not this magic bullet, because
Yeah.
we were so used to things being absolute and
Yeah.
perfect and not based in science, which is imperfect and changes and fails. And, we're not used to that ambiguity. It's hard for us.
Insisting all the while that medicine doesn't work, but somehow, how do you really believe that if you're also telling yourself that the doctor is omnipotent?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes no sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my earliest memories, and there's actually photos of me doing this, was when I was probably 3 or 4, and I was in some mother church thing. Like, I don't know if it was annual meeting or my mother wrote for the Christian Science Monitor for years, so it might have been like a writing group. I don't know. And so I'm this little girl in this little green dress, and I'm singing the Alka-Seltzer song, which at that time was plop, plop, fizz,
Yeah.
fizz. Oh, what a relief it is.
Yeah.
But I was saying belief instead of relief. Oh, what a belief it is. Intentionally knowing that that was a
Yes.
Christian Science thing.
Yes.
It wasn't like I was saying the
No, you knew what
word.
you're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
It was very intentional. And I remember I would sing this little song, and all the Christian Science adults were so delighted. They'd all, oh, I'm such a good little Christian scientist, and again, pat me on the head and tell me I was good.
Girl, I feel you.
Yeah. So I knew how to please all these
Energy.
adults, and it was by going along with all that.
So the when I was 4, I was in a lecture because my parents were cruel, apparently. A masochist. But this is how drinking the Kool-Aid I was. Um, I was 4 years old. The practitioner went into the typical asking questions of the audience that they weren't waiting for an answer to. Now with that, does that make any sense? Could you, whatever? Could a fountain have water coming out of it that's both dirty and clean? That's wackadoo. And the audience is like, yeah, right. But of course they're completely silent, right? So I don't know what the heck he's talking about. I'm not tracking this, but I understand inflection because Christian scientists are all about the inflection. If you're not going to actually do anything compassionate, you have to really pour on the compassion sauce when you're telling the person you're not going to do shit for them. So I knew all the little tones of voice and what they meant. And I heard this person say, now, and I said, oh, top of my lungs. And the whole silent auditorium is like, oh, what a charming little troll. And that was it. That was me for the rest of my life. That's who everybody saw me as. I was that clever, precocious little girl who knew that the answer was no. I don't know what the question was.
Yeah.
But I knew Socratic questioning and how
You
to
knew
act.
you knew what the right answer was to get the right reaction. Yeah.
Irony.
Yeah. So you mentioned how much discovery of psychology helped you to come out. For you,
Yeah.
like me, it was a very long, slow process. It didn't all happen at once. So talk a little bit about that.
All right. So basically, I'm 25. I go to the doctor for the first time. I find out that why I never got my period is that you were born without ovaries and fallopian tubes, and you have infantile uterus, and we can't do anything to help you. Bye. So then I get together with my my ex-wife, and this was my first intimate relationship because I had woven together, because how could you not? I had woven together my failure to go into puberty and the message that this is my responsibility with my sexuality in general. And the way it came up for me by that age was the world of intimacy is not for me. The world of romance is not for me. I just don't qualify. I'm overweight because my system is dumping the chemical into my system every month to get me to ovulate, and there's no ovary, so it's just flooding me with. And so I start this relationship, and we, in typical lesbian fashion, there was a lot of talking about our feelings and trauma, and that's fine. That's what I was looking for. And my wife eventually divulged, we were not married yet, but my wife eventually divulged that she was sexually abused by both of her parents. Um, and that's the good part.
Oh gosh.
Okay.
Yeah.
That bad. And I was ready for this challenge. My ego was loving it. I was made for this. I'm gonna fix her, and I'm gonna convince her of things that I know. And so I gave her some extremely mixed signals because I reacted with zero judgment for whatever reason. I just was like, oh no, okay. So, and she would try to back out of it. And this was very dangerous. This was a bad situation. Like I was, we were playing with fire therapeutically for years, um, and paid for it in the end. Um, in the mix of the non-judgmental acceptance that I was giving her, I was peppering in stuff like, this didn't really happen to you.
Oh my God.
Which it turns out, if you say that to someone who's extremely mentally ill from years of CPTSD, right, and torture, they think that means you don't believe them, obviously, and that they're delusional. So even though I was giving her all these other cues that I believed her, that's terrifying. She'd only known me for a couple months. So I saw her reaction, and I saw it was the wrong thing to say, but I also saw that it was intrinsically, it was central to my entire world concept. Like, this didn't really happen to you. If you don't like it, then it didn't happen. So now you just need to make that true, because it is true and you're just wrong. And she coached me compassionately out of it. She even in her total triggered, like, oh my God, what are you saying? And she said, I think you should maybe read a couple of these books. And she gave me the name of some books about, supporting sexual abuse survivors or being a sexual abuse survivor. And I started reading them. And the second that stuff started to go into my brain, because I already started asking the question, why is it the wrong thing to say that this didn't happen to you? Why? I don't know the answer yet. I start reading all these books, and they're full of very useful psychology for anybody. And it just started crowding out the CS. It's like they could not both be in the same mind. It's
Like
one or the other.
it was rewiring your brain, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something's gonna have to go. So I'm either, and it's clearly not that I'm clearly drawn to the psychology stuff, and even put myself in a situation where I would have to confront psychology stuff. So that was, so a lot of XCS talk about this like long, I don't know, you call it like a liminal space or like a purgatory or something that you spend. You might call it CS light. But the way I describe it, and I hear others describe it, is like, I'm just not good at it. It totally works. I'm just not good at it.
Yeah, I had that too. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I just don't get it. Which is really, that even was very hard for me to admit, because I'm great at this, right? I know all the answers. So that was a big step. But I stayed there for a long time. I stayed there, astrology, deep into astrology, 25 books about it, not like just honoring the logic behind it and some of the things that we see that are legit, but like, no, we're gonna get down it, or tarot reads, or Eckhart Tolle, or some other culty thing, or and but really it was just kicking around trying to find a way out of the rules of this world.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't raised with them. I was a nanny for 10 years, and I had to just pretend that I believed in germs, because I don't. I still don't. I mean, I do. Like, I know that's crazy and that they're real. And if something smells bad or is gross or is sticky, I want it off of me. And I wash my hands at all the appropriate times. But I don't actually, it's too late. Like, it's too late to believe in germs. That's there's no germs.
Well, we can't see them, so they're not real.
Yeah, we can't
right?
see them. It's like, it just doesn't. This is not a source of like strife for me or anything. It's just fascinating that it doesn't. I just act like I believe in it now.
Fake it till you make it, I guess, right?
Yeah, fake it till you make it. Crazy. Just looking at my little. Okay, so that was the main psychological thing, and then around age 35, I started looking for psychological interventions for myself, mostly related to disordered eating. And that's when I started to actually get some therapy. And when I observed my tendency to minimize anything I was experiencing and not give the accurate answer as to how bad it was. And my tendency to not really let a therapist actually contribute anything, to just talk and stay up here in my head.
I'm assuming you told them you were formerly a Christian Scientist or
Yeah,
were still.
yeah,
Did any
yep.
of them get it? Did they know what it was?
So yeah, I think so. Yeah, and some of them read, like I know at least one of them read Father, Mother, God for me.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, they effectively steered into different modalities, and chose good ones to get me to stop just coming in and giving them the weekly report.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I was like 37 or something, I read that biography of Mary Baker Eddy that was written by the Oxford scholar. Like, it's not a takedown of Christian Science, it's just an honest biography about Mary Baker Eddy. Radcliffe, she was Radcliffe. And I started reading it, and I can be a very fast reader if it pulls me in, and I just um and I finished it, and it was already happening while I was reading it, but I finished it and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna need to find some people to talk to about this that also grew up in Christian Science, because this, okay.
What sorts of things did you learn in there that
Right.
made you feel that way?
I'm really glad that's what I started with, because it is so neutral. If anything, the complaint is that she's too easy on Mary Baker Eddy, but I think it's actually a much more balanced view. What I think it took, how Christian scientists call her Mrs. Eddy.
Yeah.
That's like your hint, like, oh, you're okay, you're still in. You just
Yeah, I
call her
still do
Mrs.
it, unfortunately.
Right? It's like it's just a program thing. So it's like Mrs. Eddy pushed to the side, and instead I got an actual human. Here's an actual human. And I find psychological stuff really interesting. And boy, she's a lot of fun to think about. She's a real nut job. She's also was a powerful woman in an age where there weren't many. It's kind of tragic. She started this religion, pushed out of this field and of people, and became a female pastor, head of this church, whatever you want to call it, pastor, and then dive straight down into being controlled by men again. And I don't mean to let her off the hook. I don't mean that that's right, but like, you can see that she ain't quite right, and she needs people to be around her and be her yes men. And once you are, you can control her. And it's not that it brought sympathy; it's that I'm interested in the whole picture. And I'm lucky enough to not feel super angry about being brought up in Christian Science. Like, I had enough intimacy with my parents and my extended, and my grandparents. There was enough intimacy there. There was dysfunction too, but there was enough intimacy that it didn't feel like it does for some people who are really not getting any consolation or comfort or care, and so I guess what I learned from that book was to see her to see that I was allowed to just redesignate her as a human, a deeply flawed, mentally ill human who was trying to do something. And that's admirable. Didn't do it very well. I bet a lot of people don't. She plagiarized. She manipulated people. She holed up in people's homes and lived there rent free for ages, and then gave them advice they didn't ask for about how they should miraculously disappear their problems. She was just kind of a dreadful person. But she had charisma, apparently, and I assume she talked the way all Christian Scientists talk. It's got to have come from the top. So just the but I wanted to know more, and it's like it opened up a bunch of notions because it was done so neutrally. I was able to go, she didn't break her back on that ice. She was writing a letter trying to get money from the city 3 days later. She was all right. She realized this was her story. And when she first wrote the first edition, it didn't say nothing about falling on the ice.
Right.
That was like fourth edition or something. It was like, also, I had a miraculous recovery. So a lot of that got dismantled. And once that gets dismantled, you can start dismantling other ridiculous stuff that's maybe closer to your experience, your life, stuff that happened to you.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed like in other groups, I just interviewed a friend of mine who's an ex-Mormon, that when all of the myth around the founder is taken away, that's sort of the gateway to dismantling the entire, belief system. Like when you realize that the person that has been so mythologized for you your whole life isn't actually as they presented themselves, and they were actually a human and flawed and possibly mentally ill and things like that. It's really hard to stay in the belief system after having that knowledge.
Yeah. And I guess why she squirmed away from any kind of criticism the way she did, and the way anybody in that position does, is you have to be the, well, it's, I mean, I love to watch, series about cults, of course. And, a lot of times you can see that whoever's at the head of it is desperately holding together this false image of themselves, that they're reliant upon their cult following to shine back to them that that's who they are, even though they're not. Like that, the woman, the deep end, the woman, gray Phoenix, or I can't remember, blue Phoenix.
Teal
She's got
Swan. Yeah.
yeah, Teal Swan has a raging case of like narcissism and a host of other, complex personality disorders. Yeah, it doesn't matter. And like she desperately needs them to stay around her and let her demonize whoever she's going to demonize this week, and be like, yeah, um and but there's so much pressure, she has to hide herself, because if anyone finds out who I really am, then they'll know that this doesn't work. But you can't think that, otherwise you couldn't keep being culty. So you have to find some code way to, like I have to push you out of my life because for my safety.
Yeah.
Now that I'm older, I really have to protect my health, and I can see that you're gonna, like.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, in all my studies of cults, which means watching documentaries and listening to
Yeah.
podcasts, that one of my takeaways watching these people, because they all operate the same, they're all basically the same, is it looks exhausting.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they have to keep all these
Yeah.
plates spinning
Yeah. Yeah.
all the time. And I mean, even someone like Keith Raniere, who, for all accounts, basically just laid on couches all day
Right.
long, it still looks super tiring
Yeah.
keeping
Yeah.
up this mythology about yourself, and also managing something that I struck me when I was watching the Twin Flames documentary, one of
Yes.
one of the
That's what
two.
I was thinking of too when I said that. Go ahead.
Yeah, what happens when, because there's always a point a few years in or months in or a decade in where all of your followers realize that it's not working.
Yeah. And
And
how
the
long can you push it off?
extreme in Twin Flames is none of these people were finding their perfect lover after years
Right.
of spending all this money and doing all these coaching sessions. And
Oh,
so then they have to like rebrand and shift
yeah.
really abruptly,
Yeah.
and it just sounds exhausting.
I think
Like,
that
is
is
it worth
exactly the
it?
reaction I was having, and that's the documentary I was watching. As I
Yeah.
was noticing that you could see it weighing on this couple, that they're having to be the example of soulmates for the entire group, and they're not, right. I mean, or
They're
whatever. They're not.
normal. They're a normal
Um,
couple with normal
and so then
couple
you see him
problems.
trying to recruit other couples into doing these things too, because now we're going to turn this into Amway, right? Because we can't sustain this. We can't
Yeah.
sustain this level of scrutiny. So I've got to get new couples who still have the love bombing thing going on to tell everybody that I found my soulmate. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if well, I was just about to call her Mrs. Eddie. I'll just call her
Yeah.
Eddie. I guess that's better.
Yeah.
Um,
There you go. Call ready.
I wonder if she ever just got exhausted with all of it,
Yeah.
having to keep up this, especially, I mean, she lived to what, 90? I mean,
Yep.
that's pretty
Yep.
extraordinary in the 19th century. I'm
Yeah.
sure she had a lot of ailments. I'm sure she was in a lot of pain a lot of times,
Yeah.
and yet she had to present this persona of this magical,
Yep.
healthy person. I mean, it must have been exhausting.
Yeah. I think so. At least we have that. We can comfort ourselves with that.
Yeah.
That she was
Yeah.
probably just exhausted from
Yeah.
all of it. Is exhausting to be a pathological liar. It really is. You gotta keep a lot of plates spinning.
Yeah. Or
Or
maybe just the way their psyche is, they don't get exhausted by this stuff. I think they get a big thrill out of it. But
yeah,
for
that's
me
true.
as a non,
Right.
narcissistic psychopath, like
Right.
it sounds exhausting to me. It's way easier to just be honest. You don't have
Yeah.
to remember things.
Yeah. I think and didn't Mark Twain say that?
Oh, probably. Yeah,
I
he was super sharp. So
that's one dimension I suppose is one of the steps away from Christian Science was accidental. I was in a bookstore. I was 19 years old, and I saw Mark Twain's book Christian Science, and was naive enough to assume that it would be favorable because how could it not be? And I opened the book and I maybe looked at the first 2 pages, and something in my head went, and I couldn't unsee it.
mm,
I heard what he said. Oops.
you
Well,
can't unring that bell. Yeah.
can't unring that bell. And I don't even know what it joggled loose, like I stopped going to church. Um, and I entered into that stage of like in betweenness. But something, yeah, it was a strange and very unpleasant sensation of having something taken away from you essentially. And I must have been ready because I understood what he was saying. If I wasn't ready, I would have been able to rationalize it, of course. Um, but like apparently I was because I heard that stuff and it couldn't push it away.
Yeah. So did you ever have a feeling of fear, like you're not protected anymore? Did you ever have that?
Like, um,
Like you were now in danger because you didn't have this like protective ooze around you?
I don't think so. I don't think that it doesn't really resonate.
Mhm.
Um, I think maybe I did a lot of that processing in that in between stage where I was telling myself I wasn't a good Christian Scientist. That was maybe sort of the negotiation I was stuck in. Maybe that's the way I didn't feel the fear, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't have that. I don't think I had that experience so much. Hmm. Which is interesting because I hear a lot
Yeah.
of
So you've been able to maintain good relationships with family and
yeah. So the way it timed. Well, okay. So my mom sort of sidestepped away from Christian Science um, during the same time period. So she was a musician, church musician, and she started playing at other churches. And then she started only playing at other churches
hmm,
and saying that she just liked the music better. And for her, music is religion, which is that's sure works. But that was sort of the way she sidestepped out of it. And this kind of delves away from your question, but it's like right here. So I have 2 siblings on my mom's side. Both my parents got remarried. They just had me. Then both my parents got remarried and they each had 2 more kids. So these 2 more kids on my mom's side had a very different experience than I did. They were medically neglected, but they were not really taught Christian Science either.
hmm,
So it's like it really wasn't in the household anymore. Things had happened. People had had strokes and been stuck for 10 years, dying slowly. Like stuff had happened that kind of made the family not so cocky anymore. And and so we just didn't go to church regularly. So they weren't brought regularly. They had some foundational stuff, but mostly we're just hearing it from the grandparents around or something. And I think so often, like, which one's worse? Like, which is worse? Is it worse to have been medically neglected and to have been given really great reasons why that made you nuts because they don't make any sense? Or is it worse to be medically neglected and there's no reason given? Like, again, I don't think I'd trade. They also wouldn't trade. So the message back from them is, you know what? I'm glad that I didn't have to also get rid of all this bullshit. But I just think how, like, people in the XCS group who had a more negative experience with mentally ill parents who really didn't take care of them. That's kind of the vibe they come from, is like, it's just so barren. There's no care, and it's because I'm not worth it. I have one of my, similar to, I was thinking of this when you told the story about what popped you out of it with your son. I have a sibling who has permanent scarring on their neck because instead of taking him to the doctor when he clearly had some kind of a lymph node infection or something, we just popped him. So I don't know what they were, that you can still see the marks. I feel like I really would need a good reason why we're doing it that way. I mean, I at least got a really good reason. There was somebody telling me quotes from a book the whole time that they weren't taking care of me. Oh man,
Yeah, especially if, I would imagine, nobody around them was doing that.
Right.
Like, they probably went to school with kids that went to doctors. So they didn't even have this religion informing all of those decisions. It was just
rudimentary sense from their few experiences going to the church, a few dozens, whatever, right, from early childhood, just a basic concept of why we were doing all this. But like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting mind scratcher or brain scratcher for me. Which one's worse? One of the things I thought of during your podcast with your sister too, with Madeline, is this incident that happened. It was on a Thanksgiving. It was a number of years ago. It was possibly 20 years ago. I was newly moved to Minnesota, and I did not have a good enough appreciation for the ice and snow. I didn't get it yet, how serious it was. And my sister came for Thanksgiving, and this is my sister from my mom's side, who was raised kind of in Christian Science, right? And she and I walked across the street to the grocery store to grab something else we needed for Thanksgiving. My wife was at home, and coming out of the store, she said, "Yeah, yikes, this is really super icy." And I was like, "Don't worry." I said, "Don't worry, it's just ice." Which you could argue that's just stupid, but I feel like there's a CS connection there too. And then I proceed to fall spectacularly and break the heck out of my arm to the point that like couldn't be set and had to be surgeried, right? So I go down, and then we get me up, and I'm trying to, I mean, it's clearly broken. And my sister's like, "Oh, holy shit, let's just get her home." And we walk in the door of the apartment, and we start telling my wife what's going on. She's like, it's horrible. Like, it's clearly in a serious situation. And me and my sister both go, "What do we do?" And she's like, "Call an ambulance now. Let's go." And we were like, "Are you sure?" And she was like, "It's broken."
Is
it
bad enough?
It does look broken. She's like, "It doesn't look broken. It's broken. It turns a corner." Like, she told me afterwards, she's like, "That is the only time I ever thought that you and your sister were stupid. That either of you, like, you both come across as extremely intelligent." But in that moment, I was like, "What the fuck are you dumb?
Yeah.
Get to the hospital. It's bent." That was interesting to me, because my sister is atheist, socialist, humanitarian, highly intelligent, and she didn't know what to do either.
Yeah, it's hard trying to make up for a lifetime of ignorance of medical stuff. I mean, at this point, I feel like I'm never going to catch up. So I just take things as they come,
Yeah, just pretend to believe in germs.
Yeah. And luckily, I mean, I have to say, in navigating medical stuff for my two sons, talking to other parents is definitely a good way to go. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do with this, especially with school? And like, at what point do you not send them to school?
Yeah, it helps you find the zone of normal or something.
Yeah. So I feel like I have a system now of, when to really react and when to just see how it goes. And I feel like I'm doing okay with that. With the understanding that even people who grew up with medicine don't always get that right when it comes to your kids, because 'cause they're not you. You don't know what they're feeling. Like, how bad is the pain? How bad is the fever? You
Right.
know? But I don't feel like I'm ever gonna catch up for a lifetime of ignorance and an intentionally shutting myself off from any of this information that everyone else got. How do you make up for, 35 years of ignoring all medical stuff? You
Right.
you don't.
Right. Right. Yeah, you're on the wrong end of the learning curve. We all are.
Yeah, and you just kinda have to throw yourself at the mercy of whatever doctors you're assigned to and just hope they're good.
Yeah.
Hope
Right.
they're good at it, which they aren't all. I
Right.
remember I was in this, lawsuit years ago, and somebody asked me, "Well, do you have a good lawyer?" I'm like, "How do I know? I have a lawyer." Like, I didn't hire someone I thought was crappy. Like, I
Right.
don't know.
But I don't know. We'll find
I'll
out when we get there, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, like, if I win, he was good,
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? Do you have a good doctor? It's like, I don't know. If I survive, I guess he was good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's that level of uncertainty that all of normal life brings, which is just anathema to Christian Scientists. Like,
Yeah.
we having
Yeah.
to deal with uncertainty is I still struggle with it. And I know all people do. I know this is not unique to me,
Right.
but I do track that back to having any belief system, because most religions do this, of giving you, like, pretending to give you all of the answers
Yes.
and having to come to a place of, we don't know a lot of things still and may never, and how utterly frustrating that
Yeah.
is. Most of
Yes.
the time I can just sort of live with it like we all do. We all just kind of go through our lives knowing that things are uncertain. But every once in a while, if I'm in a particularly depressive place, which thankfully I'm not that much anymore, it gets very dark and very heavy and very like, I cannot stand living in a world where I could just walk out my door and be killed in a car accident. Like, that thought is
Right.
unbearable.
I have to believe that there's something I'm doing that's gonna cover me. I've got so
Yeah.
sure.
And most of the time that thought isn't unbearable. It's just, well, that's just the way it is for everybody. But every once in a while, it's like, I can't stand this. I
Yeah.
can't stand
Yeah. Yeah.
knowing that the wolves are always at the door.
Yeah.
It's just, that thought is just unbearable. But that's what life is. Welcome to,
Yeah. Welcome to right. Right. Stay here with us. Don't tell yourself that the whole ball you're living on is pretend.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say, I was going to ask you if there's anything you miss about being in Christian Science. And I would start by saying what I miss is the certainty,
Yeah.
that comforting, warm blanket of, we have all the answers and everything's going to be okay and nothing bad will happen to you because you can control it. I miss that. Even though it was all bullshit, I miss it.
Yeah. I remember this analogy coming to me as I was, so basically what happened was I found this CS group, the XCS group, joined it, and at that point it was new enough, although it was still very well established, but it was new enough that I went back and read the entire group scroll, everything anybody had ever said to any, from day one. And that was probably the most galvanizing experience of my life.
Mm,
Like, I just felt like all of these pieces of me were like brought, like, you know, um, and and that's when the three admins built the XCS website, because we were first talking about doing a book, and then we were like, website is accessible, you don't have to have any money, let's just get it out there. And so I contacted anybody who, as you know, anybody who I felt had something, we should use. I asked them if I could edit it. I did not sleep at night for like 3 months. I don't know how. I just know it feels directly related to like encountering all this feedback from other ex-Christian scientists, seeing all the parallels, also seeing stories that were so much worse than mine, that really gave me stuff to think about. Because it's like sometimes when stuff is in technicolor like that, it gets a little bit easier to see something that's nutty, because it just happened so much bigger to somebody else. Um, and as I was editing all this stuff, um, I think that was the completion of that work. I mean, as much as could be done that round, then you're always finding more stuff. But remind me of the question you asked me, because I know that was a little bit off the topic, but that was what I was relating.
Yeah, I think I was gonna ask,
A
if there's
positive
anything
memory.
you miss. Yeah, positive memories or anything you miss about being in Christian Science.
Um, I think that I was able to kind of come out of that with an appreciation for like the trivia of CS childhood. Like it seemed a little bit less traumatic, sort of like the next step from when I had read Father, Mother, God and been like, how dare you? And also, oh my God, there's someone else. Um, I was able to kind of walk into the next stage of things, because I was hearing all these voices that all made sense, that the we were all taking it down in the same way. Like, of the things that get argued about in there, it is never about interpretation of CS. Like, that's never what the argument is. Anytime somebody says, it always struck me this way, that this didn't make sense, and everyone's like, yes, like there is you unanimous takes on it in that regard, um, which is fascinating and helpful. I think I miss, I used to think, when things were really bad as a child, run to your room and throw on the bed and cry mad, that kind of feeling, right? I would think something like I would die without Christian Science.
Mhm.
And I don't know what that translates to. I don't know what it was, that another way to say that, like, is it because Christian Science was also the source of much of my problems? I was heckled at school all the time and stuff. And I just wanted to come home to a safe place. And then I would get home and it would be like I could feel that I was tiresome. So in that solitude, I would think I would die without Christian Science. And I guess I think maybe what that really decodes to is I can't let go of this thing that doesn't really make sense, because this is already pretty bad and I have no control over my life because I'm a child. So thank God I've got this thing to help me rationalize my anger away and my misery away. That's the way I use Christian Science. I use Christian Science to alter my emotional state. And that's all you can ever do it use it to do, is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Um,
can sort of temporarily alleviate frustration, anger, sadness,
yep,
anxiety, and that's worth something, I guess.
it
But it
is.
doesn't
It
really
is a
give you
very
any coping skills. It
yeah.
does it just comes back.
Oh,
You
it is
know?
a very overwrought system on on suppression,
Yeah.
how to suppress pain, emotions, fear.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do it. I
You
mean,
do.
it does work kinda.
Yep. Yep. It's
But
just
it's,
there's this whole
for the in the long
whack-a-mole,
run, it doesn't.
this whole whack-a-mole nature of the universe thing that makes it just not quite come off, because it's
Yeah.
gonna pop up over here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And also coming to the realization that this pursuit of happiness that we're, promised in this country anyway, um, is ongoing. It's not finite, which was something that I think anybody who's in a cult or controlling group or religion, I think a lot of us think that happiness is something that you just get at a certain point and it just stays with you and you're just happy.
right.
And it took me far too long into my adult life to realize that you have moments of happiness.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
it. You
yeah,
get
and
moments. You
accepting
don't
that it
get
isn't happening.
it's
Yeah,
not with you all the time.
yeah, that's just not. And yeah, it is. It's an attempt to crystallize and just stay there, um, and just deny anything that gets in the way of your story.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that is such a tragic pattern is so many ex-CS taught, if their parents are still in, is that you see a mental cycling cycling down. I'm not quite sure if I'm saying it the right way, but like there's a common path that a lot of these people seem to get onto as they're older because you've spent your entire life using untrue anecdotes about family healings that aren't real as bracing blocks in this tower you're building of your life. And every time you add another brick to a bullshit story, you see it all shake because it doesn't fit. And you remember that, like Madeline talking about her finger healing. Well, it happened 4 days ago, and I've been watching it heal by 25% each day. So, um, you see older Christian scientists who will not go gently into good night, starting to spiral down into insanity.
Yeah.
Like a dog chasing its tail because they've built this whole freaking tower on lies, and
Yeah.
and they're precious to them. That's what's interesting. Where my mom is at now. She did read. I asked her to read. She asked me for recommendations on books to read, and she did read them. So I should not represent that this is where she's at right now. But what I found interesting is that my mom gave me no pushback when we would talk about it kind of in sections. I got no heat from her whatsoever. Completely respectful, completely allowing room for whatever, curious, engaged, willing to read things. And where I lost her was the book, 100 Years of CS Healing, of Christian Science Healing, which has all these anecdotes in it. And she was like, but I think those are true. And I was like, Mom, you don't see that's sentimental? Like, why is that little book have all the true stories in it? You know what I'm saying? They don't sound true. They sound pretty weird.
Yeah.
It's like we have these, these family portraits, and I don't think we always know where the CS stops and the family begins or something. It's like all that nostalgia, it's all woven together. And
Yeah. Yeah. My mother and I had a similar conversation about that same book, 100 Years of Christian Science Healing. And because she was, this is the thing that I find so maddening, is she was also in and out. For as much as she
right,
died a classic,
right,
horrible Christian Science death, she had these moments of clarity. And there
right.
were long periods where she was actually out, like, I'm not part of this anymore. Even in the end, even after we weren't even in contact anymore, I
Hmm.
know that she joined the ex Christian Scientist Facebook group
Oh
briefly,
yeah, I
much to
remember
my
that.
chagrin. That was very
Oh,
fraught for me.
yes, yes, yes.
Um, so she was in and out, and always questioning and doubting, but still always just going back to it because I think it was comfortable and familiar. And I think at that point, whatever illness she had was so far advanced that to at that point decide I am going to go see a doctor was just too scary. And I'm sure she was afraid of being shamed. I would have too. I would have been so afraid of walking into a doctor's office and them being like, "Why did you let it go this long? What's wrong with you?"
Right.
And
Well,
that alone would be enough to not go, you know?
one of the things that struck me, um, is is on one of the other podcasts, the person was speaking about having to convince their parent to go in for help, and felt that they had to lie to them, that they would get in trouble in order to get them out. And my impression was, I don't think that was a lie. I think you would have very likely gotten in trouble on some level. I don't think that was a lie. And it's one of those things where you see something, that person will surely watch, if they watch me talking here, will see me doing something similar, I'm sure, to be clear, right? But I just felt this compassion for, like, no, you know, that was true. That was true. And just because you had to appeal to that parent's respect for your autonomy and, respect for what they were putting you through, that's not dishonest. That's keeping it real.
Yeah, and it worked in that
Yeah, and it worked.
situation,
And it
so,
worked. Um, and I had, one of my grandfather both my grandfathers died in spectacular fashion. Um, and my mother's father was 60 years old. He had a massive stroke, and I was 14, and I could not get my mind around. This was interesting because I had not had the opportunity to confront this particular aspect of Christian Science. So I found myself like having to think about it, actually seeing it happen. And that is, how did she not call 911?
Mm.
Like, no, no, sure, I know we will live for years with horrible ailments, but like, he fell out the bed and couldn't talk at 3 in the morning. How do you not like, I don't understand. And does that make me a bad Christian Scientist, or does it make her a bad wife? Because I kind of didn't forgive her for that, but it wasn't like I had it in those words, like I wasn't, but my uncle, his son, so my grandfather has this massive stroke, he gets no treatment, they bring him to a one of those CS facilities or something, and now it's the moment is lost because he's post stroke and getting no therapy. So he lived for 10 years unable to talk or
Oh,
move
wow.
hardly or anything, mostly because he didn't get any treatment right after it. So my uncle flies up and is visiting him in this CS facility, and my uncle is he really never bought it. And so he was the one to be like, Dad, come on, man, this is not the place to be, you need some real help. And he was like, "Ugh." And so he had another stroke. That's what happens at the facility. And my uncle called 911, and they freaked out. And he brought him in. He went and waited at the door, brought him to his father's room. And they put on whatever measuring device I'll get the terminology wrong, but whatever it was, the highest that the machine went was 300, and it just went. So I don't know if it was his heart rate or they're measuring something, right? And so he says to my uncle, if you don't get him to take this nitroglycerin right now, he's gone. I can't make him take it because he's going, no, 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 no. So my poor uncle had to force feed this nitroglycerin to his father as he's dying on the floor. And my grandfather is saying, no, 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 no. That's suicidal.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's suicidal. He saw these symptoms for 4 years, and everybody else did too. He was getting nosebleeds in the shower. He was passing out driving. He was having little seizures that nobody was mentioning to anybody else in the family. Um, my mother saw it coming, and he would not talk, would not allow anybody to bring it up to him. And she gave him a sealed letter as they left after a trip to come see us, and said, please read this. And when she went to clear out his stuff after the stroke, she found it sealed in a drawer. And she thought, okay, I could be hurt, or I could view this as he was afraid that if he read it, it would work. And so he wouldn't read it because he couldn't do it. And that's like, I think that Christian Scientists at the end they believe that they are acting out of religious principles. And I don't think that they are. I think that when you're in that much pain, you are not using your prefrontal cortex anymore. So any skill that you do have for prayer or whatever, or calming yourself or whatever, you're not accessing that anymore. You are off the pain charts. And um, so if you won't go to a hospital at that point, it's because you are afraid to go to a hospital. You're afraid. You're not a Christian Scientist who doesn't do that sort of thing. That's just, nobody is left in that place at the end. It's abject terror.
Yeah.
And that's how both of my grandparents died. But both my grandfathers died because they were absolutely terrified. Um, and it saved one of my grandmothers because she said, this is bullshit and I'm going to the doctor, and found out she had an inactive thyroid for 20 years. And I think that then saved my dad when he had heart symptoms and he went, because I was shocked that he went in, absolutely shocked, so grateful and relieved. And he navigated it very gracefully, and did whatever they told him to do. And I think that seeing his mom make that change in the end of her life, and live the last 20 years of her life with proper care, and have a decent exit, I think that legalized it for him. I perhaps.
Yeah.
But I was really proud of him. and grateful that he went in.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the fact is, we're all gonna die. A lot of us are gonna get cancer, which sucks. I hate that reality, but it's true. But at least we can be somewhat comfortable.
Yeah.
We don't have to die like animals out in the woods, you know? I mean, that's how my mother died. We don't know what killed her, we'll never know, but my sister and I assume that it's cancer, and, um, I'm just haunted by the terrible suffering, the terrible, terrible suffering, all alone, literally like an animal. She just sort of crawled away and died by herself, and it's just she didn't deserve that.
No.
She did not deserve that. Nobody deserves that. She deserved comfort and pain pills and her 2 daughters by her side saying we
Yeah.
loved her. That's what should have happened.
Yeah. And she could have had that even with the trouble that she was causing at the end, because you did know who she really was. You were able to say this is not a character for her, you know. Um yeah. Yeah. I think so much like the hospice community, there's a lot of overlap there with like CS elder care. Um, but it's just that it's given to people who shouldn't be only receiving hospice care because they could have a better standard of life. Like if there was an ideology there blocking it, like those two could merge. Like there's just an acceptance. We're just going to care for you. We're going to make this better, but they can't even reach out for that for themselves.
Yeah.
Why not?
And the other part that I'm hoping not everyone goes through, but I would imagine my mother at least went through, is dying feeling like a failure,
Yes.
So to add insult to injury, not only are you going through unspeakable physical
Yeah.
agony.
But I didn't fix it. I
Yeah,
didn't fix
I
it. No
never
fault.
got
I
it.
don't understand something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never got it. Other people got it. I couldn't get it no matter how hard I tried.
She chased it her whole life. If it wasn't Christian Science, it was something else. Trying to get it right. And that's I try to figure out what commonalities there are in people who end up in Christian Science. And I think the reason it's so hard and is number one, because there aren't as many as you think, because people are born into it. So it's like it just changes all the you, it's not the same as a cult that people find. It's just not the same. So you can get any kind of person. Um, and then, to the question, well, what makes the difference between someone who gets out and someone who doesn't? God, I don't know, because there isn't necessarily anything in common to begin with, because anybody can be born into Christian Science. But of course, you're going to have your own reactions to that and your family and this kaleidoscopic, all these differences between little, different lives. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the questions I like to ask people or sort of get to is, do you think there was something in you that made you able to get out, whereas others couldn't? And because I've thought about this a lot, and people have asked me, my husband had asked me, how were you, what was it about you that you were able to get out of this? Because a lot of people can't. And I think I've given it a lot of thought, and I boil it down to, as much as my mother died of this thing and kept with it, she always had this sort of rebellious spirit, and I think in a weird sort of way, Christian Science was a rebellion for her because her parents were not religious, and it was sort of this, if you're gonna rebel against your non-religious parents, you become religious. It's one of those things,
yeah,
and I always had this sort of rebel spirit of, "Don't tell me what to do."
yeah, yeah.
And eventually, I got that from her 100%, and eventually it worked against what she wanted because I ended up rebelling against Christian Science.
And that so my current partner also grew up in a cult like religion, and so that's just our favorite topic, right? And something that he said to me was, um, hang on, it's right here, and I'm gonna forget. Oh yeah, right. He was saying that high control religions, cults, even Christianity, they hand you the keys to get out when they tell you to study the Bible,
Yep.
um, because everything you need to walk away is right there. If you, uh, yeah, like one of the other admins in groups said it also really wisely. It's like, I looked deeply into the Bible for answers, and I was horrified by what I found. Um, so yeah, I I think that in my case, the reason I share that is that I was taught self-examination, or that's what I picked up on the most. Maybe that, I'm sure I could have had some predilection, but that's where I found myself, in my childhood years, was using Christian Science to look around in my brain and find all the little monsters in the corners that might be error. But that same self-examination let help me navigate the territory when I was leaving, and gave me the the hardware to be able to exist on the other side of it. But I don't know that that's unique. And I think there might be like many, many, many reasons why somebody makes it out. Maybe for some people it is witnessing a horrible death. For some people it is seeing that they maybe just almost endangered their child. Um, you know, having to go for psychological help because the state of your life is in a certain place, and then those ideals, you see, they conflict and they push them out. Like, all these are all different, you know different manifestations.
Yeah.
Trigger word.
I know,
um
trigger word, trigger word.
like, yeah, I think that it sounds like an ad for the XCS group too, but I think honestly, yeah, finding support.
Yeah.
Right, finding, because once I saw, well, there really is a community. Okay, is there a community from experts? Oh, there is. I see. And then you're basically in group therapy with them, and you're getting to see all these mirrors, and you're getting all this information, and it advances you more quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, I haven't brought this story up yet because it's silly, but it was, if I honestly look back at what the real like kicker was for me,
Yeah.
there was an incident,
Yep. Yep.
and this was it, and it's
Okay.
really petty, but it was just the thing that made me go,
Sometimes that's what makes you see it. Yeah.
yeah. So I was 20 years old, and very much into CS. And I took my first solo trip abroad. I'd saved up money. I really wanted to go to England. I wanted to do the whole like Beatles pilgrimage, super into the Beatles, went to Liverpool. And we had a Christian Science friend who had grown up in England, and her mother was there. And I could stay with her for a few days. Older lady, super nice. And I was like, great. So I stay with this lady, and she has another friend there who's a practitioner, an English woman. I'm going to guess probably 60s, 70s.
Mhm.
And at one point, I borrowed the friend's mom's sweater because she made it very clear, like, "Oh, anything in this house is yours, just take what you need, don't worry about it." So I borrow her sweater, or what I thought was her sweater, and I forgot to put it back. And because it had only been like a few hours, and turns out it was this other lady's sweater. She's going, "Where's my sweater? Where's my sweater?" And I had this moment of, "Oh, okay. Do I
Right.
admit that I have it, or do I just kind of like pretend?" So I was like, "Okay, I'll be honest." And I brought it to her and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I borrowed this. I thought it was this other lady's."
Right.
And she just like went off on me, like off. Like, "That is so rude. Are they all that rude where you come from?" And just like total character assassination.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that moment, I was like, fuck all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was it. That's all it took, was for yet another, like, older Christian Science lady
Yes.
to be mean to
Oppressive,
me,
and yeah. Yeah.
that I was
Yeah.
like, "You know what? I've been putting up with this bullshit
Yeah.
of these non-empathetic, non-caring, non-kind older women,
Yes. Yeah.
including my
God, that's
mother,
awful. It's like
my
the
whole
years.
life."
Like, they have compassion fatigue, but they haven't been compassionate. It's just like the years of pretending to be compassionate just wears them down.
Yeah, I mean, she just, like, exploded on me, and I was just, that was a huge step out, where I just felt it was the lack of compassion, the lack of human understanding that I had made a mistake, that I
Yeah.
was being honest, like, the complete, and that was so Christian Science to me, like, you're not
Yeah.
allowed to make a mistake, you're not allowed to be human, and I was just done, and that was, like, I think I was, like, 50% out after that incident happened,
Yeah.
because I was so mad.
I
The
mean,
irony is, later that night, I tiptoed down to the kitchen and I overheard her on the phone talking to her practitioner, saying that she was really just really feeling poorly and just I'm just so frustrated that I just can't seem to get a handle on this thing. She obviously was having some medical problem that I was unaware
Right.
of. Um, and it gave me this odd empathy. I was like, "Oh, so she's not feeling well. That's why she lashed out at me like that, you know?" And I was like, "That's very not Christian Science of me to say that, to give her a pass because she was ill."
Right.
So it's like, I'm not like these people. I'm not this. This isn't me,
Isn't
you
me.
know?
Yeah, I remember having I didn't talk much about measles on here because I've got the big long story on the website. But I was at Prin during one of the measles outbreaks and was extremely ill. Um, and the lack of compassion was was so startling that we were actually able to see it. You know, even like card carrying CS kids. Um,
You wanna
but
give a
it
little background on this outbreak? Because this was a big deal.
This was a big one. This was 1989. It made it into the CDC. They were hiding kids and moving them from house to house so they wouldn't find the sick one.
So this was a measles outbreak at Principia.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Christian Science
Um,
college and school.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was the upper. It was both campuses, but the center of the outbreak was the upper school. Um, the conditions were that of a third world country during that epidemic. It was They had no idea how to handle it, and it happens there every couple of years. So that's not
Mm,
really they don't really have an excuse. Um, but there was a couple of moments during that. Um, I definitely had a fever high enough to cause hallucination for more than a day. Um, I I remember crawling down the hall to the bathroom on my hands and knees to get a hot washcloth because I was dying of pneumonia.
mm,
So I could not breathe through my nose or my throat. If
wow.
I tried to breathe through my throat, there was so much mucus that I would choke continually, and breathing through my nose was not an option. So it would reach the point where I was beginning to die of pneumonia. And I don't have proof of that. And I don't mean to be dramatic, but it's like, wasn't I? Like, I couldn't breathe. I could not. I was like, okay. So I would crawl down the hallway on my hands and knees to the bathroom to get a hot washcloth, and nobody ever noticed, which is
Nobody
not
checked in
possible.
on you,
Not
nobody.
possible.
Yeah.
But they would appear the moment I returned to my room because they were convinced that I was trying to treat my chapped lips with the wet washcloth, and they needed me to know that that was not going to work, which is true. Offering some chapstick would have been nice. Um, Not appearing the second I got back to my room and yanking the washcloth away from me, as they say, this is what she goes. She goes, she goes, sweetheart, we can't be looking to material means for comfort. How about some Vaseline? What?
Oh my gosh.
And she's just my lips were cracked and bleeding, and nothing gets the attention of a Christian Scientist like a cosmetic problem. That's the one, boy. Um,
Because you can see it.
yeah. And so she's telling me, and she's yanking this thing away from me repeatedly, and I'm like trying to tell her I'm dying. I can't breathe through my throat or my nose. And she would take it away, and I would just crawl back down the hallway for it again. Like, it
Ugh,
was a scene. There
that's
was kids in
horrific.
wheelchairs. It was it was it was it's miraculous that more kids didn't die. There's like usually like one kid a year dies when this happens. Um, the other thing that always sticks out to me from that time is they wouldn't let any of us work with our regular practitioners because they felt it was better if we worked with local practitioners who could visit us, which they didn't. So really, I think it was just a way to like fund the local practitioners in St. Louis. And so I was assigned some random ass woman who I'd never met and wasn't allowed to call her practitioner from birth. Not that she was that comforting either. And one night I was moved from one location to the next, which was supposed to indicate that I was getting better. And but as you're getting better from having a raging fever for days and days and days, along with a heavy cold, guess what you get? An ear infection. So I get this horrific, I've never in my life felt pain like this. It was unbelievable. And I start calling this practitioner repeatedly. There's nobody noticing around the campus house that this is happening to like stop and, help me. So I start calling her repeatedly and she gets pissed off. And as I'm hysterically crying, saying, I feel like my head's going to blow up. I feel like my ears are exploding. Help, help, help. And she was like, you're just going to have to get control of yourself. There's nobody there to help you. And I'm not there. And this is just error. And you need to, whatever. You've had enough. You've indulged this for long enough. And I was just like, what the hell is happening right now?
Yeah.
And I thought it was somebody talking about like, practitioner barking in your ear. That was like, I get it from that. Like, just like, what? I'm sorry, I'm just busy over here dying. The the lack of compassion is troubling, and that's probably one of the things that I am left with the most. Like I'm always like, is my compassion fake? Am I faking it? Do I actually feel compassion for anybody? I mean, I'm great at looking like it, but then also sometimes I just like completely forget to do the right thing. But I'm like very people focused, so why do I have no compassion? And I think that I do have compassion, but it's a very tangly conversation.
Yeah, it's
A
complicated for us. Yeah, because we were raised with little or none.
lot of compassion with no care. And
Yeah.
that's not actually compassion. That's putting on an affectation that'll make you feel like it's okay to not do anything. I think that's why they're so false, syrupy sweet, because that's the only thing that would make it deceptively look like it wasn't complete neglect and like cultural sociopathy.
Yeah, but then occasionally that curtain falls and we see, when we get barked at. I certainly had a couple of conversations with practitioners over the phone like that where they were just angry that I called them
You're making
late
me
or
look bad.
frustrated, and they would just like bark at me like, "Well, you're just going to have to blah 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 because I'm not on right now, click," you know? And again, like, I'm sure there are doctors that act like that occasionally. Everybody snaps, everybody gets frustrated, everybody has a bad day, but you add those moments in to all of the other things, and it paints a complete picture of what life in Christian Science is actually like, you
Yeah,
know? And these things aren't all coincidences.
yeah, yeah.
So you survived the measles outbreak
But
at
yeah, I survived the measles
Principia.
outbreak. I also
Wow.
survived diphtheria, which was fun. Um, I remember it took them a week to get me treated because they didn't know what it was. And then my doctor said, I finally found a picture of what you have in a journal of, um, what would be the right way to say a disease that no one has anymore? Whatever. So basically she went into a journal of stuff nobody has anymore because she was like, wait, she's not vaccinated. And then she found what was wrong with me. She found that it was diphtheria.
Wow.
Um, so that was a very unique experience because that's like I was seeing this medical professional be like, this is not a cold. What the hell's wrong with her? And having to go research, based on, okay, well, I guess it could be something that is vaccinated against because she hasn't been vaccinated. And oh, there it is.
Eradicated diseases, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, the one thing I wanted to mention, and that basically I think covers everything I was going to try to say on mine. So, is anything else you want? Um, I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, I hate when that happens. Diphtheria. Oh yeah. Okay. If I'm on the track for medical care, like if I'm in with a certain office and I see them sequentially, I can do that. But when a medical problem arises, I am screwballs. Like there's something very wrong with my like ability to assess how much care I need. Um, I I almost had a burst appendix because I wouldn't go in because I kept telling myself it was a symptom of something else, even though it went on for 4 days. So it couldn't have been the thing I was comparing it to. And I finally had to call 911 and have an ambulance take me because I waited so long that I became like terrified and incapacitated. Um, and I got to the hospital, they scheduled me for surgery, and literally as they're wheeling me in, I felt it start to go. like the pain just changed dramatically. All of a sudden it was like this hot crackling. And I was like, oh man, I'm glad that I'm not going to feel a burst appendix, but boy, I think I cut it about 10 minutes away. Like,
Wow.
get me in there now. Um, I have like horrible dental problems and I just won't deal with it. So like that's kind of where I see some of the mental health dysfunction. Um, I do not, and I will strike back against someone telling me to go in. Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm sure you would go in if you had some stomach pain and sit in it. I don't want to sit in an office for 4 hours. I'll go if it gets bad. And they're like, you haven't left the bed in 2 days. You know, it's like there's just
Yeah,
something
it
screws
seems
with.
like ex-Christian scientists tend to go either to the hypochondria
Yeah,
area,
or they just don't quite.
yeah,
Yeah,
or we just still let things go too long, suffer needlessly.
yep,
And again, as Jeremy pointed out, our United States healthcare system doesn't help because everything is expensive and difficult to get. And if healthcare were free and easily accessible, it might be a little different for us.
right,
There are definitely times I would have gone in for things if I'd known it wasn't going to cost me something.
yeah, right,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So here we are in the real world. I think I'm going to wrap up. Is there anything else you want to add, or
I don't think so. I think
we covered the bases? Well, I will
yeah,
ask you the two final questions, even though we kind of went over this already.
sure,
But
yeah.
do you think Christian Science is a cult?
So the answer I put down was yes, and um, because I do think it's valid to say, but all religions are. Also, though, I want to respect that there is a difference between a cult. If there's criteria, if it doesn't fit the criteria and you're forcing it in, there's plenty of very mild. Like, look at for example. Does that really strike you as cult? Well, I mean, you could argue it's like a cult for leftist liberals or something, right? But um, I think that's why I kind of like, if you need to call it a cult, then you should call it a cult. If that gets in your way and it makes it too, you feel like it'd be too aggressive, fine. You don't have to call it that. Just keep
Yeah,
doing what you're doing, kind of a thing. But
yeah,
yeah, of course, it's a cult.
yeah. And do you think Mary Baker Eddy was a shyster or a true believer, or both?
Yeah. So my answer on that one was she's the Fox Mulder of religious shysters. She wants to believe.
Yeah,
I think that she grew up she was a manipulative person. She figured out that that being sickly was going to help her out. Um, but I also think that she was desperately searching for something. I don't know if anybody knows what it was. I don't know if it was really pain that she was having or if she was just having mental issues and used morphine for that. Who knows, right? Um, I think she basically started up a Ponzi scheme and called it a religion. So yes, she was a shyster. She plagiarized all her stuff.
yeah, we
She
know
tried
that
to
to be
destroy,
true.
yeah, right. She tried to destroy other women who had any kind of influence in the church, like
Yeah.
shipped them out to other places, told stories about them, like yikes. Um, she was a shyster, and I think that she wanted to believe, and she kept trying to rewrite it and make it work. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to think that she probably had the same cognitive dissonance that we have all had. Just like you kind of feel like you're onto something, but it also doesn't actually work.
yeah. And I think we have to consider the possibility that she wrote almost all of that textbook high on morphine.
Yep.
Like that might not be the case. Might not be the case. But like if you read it with that possibility, it sort of holds up in court. It sounds like yes, it really does sound like she's way out there because you start the sentence and by the end of the sentence they don't match up.
Mm,
But
that's
she's
interesting.
building on it for pages. But like you said, it's
Yeah.
gobbledygook.
Yeah, yeah. I like that theory because recently in again my cultic studies,
Yeah.
I've come to realize the role that drugs have played in a lot of these leaders.
Yeah,
Because
yes, that is very suspicious, isn't it?
yeah, because
I think
I
the
didn't
religious
realize
stuff
Jim
seemed like a red
Jones
flag or
was
a red herring. Yeah,
a major drug addict.
major pillhead. Yeah.
L. Ron Hubbard, major drug
Yep.
addict.
Yep.
And, these people were writers, they had
Yep.
textbooks, they had yeah, I don't think that should be discounted, the effects of major drug use on some of these people and what it turned them into, which they might have been anyway, but it didn't help.
So, right, yeah, it's nice to just kind of, if we can know or figure it out, apply that when we're looking at what they wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Elizabeth. This has been
Thank
such
you.
a pleasure talking to you. I know we've kind of been in each other's orbits for many years, so I'm really
Yeah.
delighted to meet you in person-ish.
Yeah. Yeah, you too. It's been really cool. Thank you. I love
Yeah.
what you're doing. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to Leaving Christian Science. Disclaimer, I'm not an expert, I'm not a historian, I'm not a therapist, I'm just an ordinary, imperfect human who had the misfortune of being born into Christian Science. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests and do not necessarily represent those of the host. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional, medical, legal, or psychiatric advice.